Hello. And good early afternoon. You are here live. We are at the Wharf in Orange Beach, Alabama, Wisdom Harbor Studios. I'm Andy Andrews. Welcome to the Blue Plate Special. Lunchtime learning and laughter. We hope you're having lunch. We figured it probably wouldn't be very interesting to just let me have lunch. Even though if Bob Woodall was cooking lunch, I'd probably stop and eat it. Hi, Betty from Troy. My neck since the surgery is doing good. Thank you for asking. Hey, Patricia in North Carolina. Melody Van Arsdale. And Sandra from Searcy, Arkansas. I always remember. Searcy, I can't help but think of Searcy, Arkansas, Harding University, where they ate their mascot. Yes, that's right. Dover, Delaware. Wow. Hey. Good to see you. And they're from San Antonio. Hey, old man. Kevin Perkins is here. Kevin, you would not believe how many people read the bottom of the pool and ask me, is Kevin Perkins, is that a real person? I was telling him, no, he's not. He's not. Joyce Martin. Hey, Joyce, how are you doing? Joyce Martin, man, you got to hear. Just go on YouTube sometimes and click The Martins and just listen. Unbelievable. Gina Christmas, how are you? Dan Stone, hello from the North Pole. It must feel like the North Pole, living in Duluth, Minnesota. Even now. Do you know, I was near you one time. This was years ago. Hey, Yvonne. I was in Minot, North Dakota, and it was in June, and it snowed. I couldn't believe it. Hey, Jeff Herring. You guys, today we have something very special. I'm gonna read to you again, but this time I'm gonna read from a special book. If you will, you guys, today we please, if you haven't clicked the notification button right there, if you're watching on Facebook, you could be watching on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, click that subscribe button. That would help me, cost you nothing, and makes this easy to find next time you log on to YouTube. But hi to those of you on Instagram. Thank you for joining us. And for the guys on Twitter, Brian Backen is your Twitter leader. But if you're on Facebook, there's a notification button. And if you just click it, Gene McDonald, if you could just click it, you would be notified every time that we're on the air. And that would just be cool for everybody. And also, if you don't mind sharing, there's a share button over there down at the bottom right if you're on Facebook, and you can share, and it'll say, like, what do you want to share it to? Do you want to share it to your next door neighbor? Do you want to share it to your and when it says share to your page, that's the one you want to click on. That way we will actually go live on your page on this particular show. And I have something that's special that I wanted to do for you today. In the past couple of days, an early warning has gone out that my new book is coming out September 8th. This one, it actually drops. That's publishing vernacular, but it drops September 8th. And the name of the book is Just Jones. Sometimes the thing seems impossible until it is actually done. But Just Jones is the third installment in the Noticer series about the old man. And I'll tell you what, this I think is my favorite thing that I've done. We'll see what you think. I hope you think so. But I'm going to read you some of the first of it today. But we're attempting to get some people to help us tell people about it, and that is, people ask me sometimes, what is your biggest aggravation in your business? I think my biggest aggravation in my business is to work hard on something and I mean, it's one thing if you don't like it, but it just kills me if you don't even know I've done it. So we're trying to spread the word about this one. and do it early. And so it's available for pre-order, and those pre-orders are very important. We've got a link there. Some people have asked, when we send an early message out, an email message that gives people the opportunity to download the first 3 chapters for free. And if you didn't get that email, make sure that you go on andyandrews.com and put your address in there. We won't bother you or anything, and I won't give anybody your address. But if we have something important, we would love to let you know. And if you say, well, gosh, I did that and I'm not getting anything from you, check your spam and make sure that we're able to get through, okay? I really am excited about this. And I thought before I start reading some of it, I should tell you just a little bit about the whole thing, because obviously I can't read the whole thing to you. Oh, here's one question that people have asked. A lot of people kind of responded to that email and said, well, what about the audio? What about the audio? You know, we want to get the audio. And is Andy going to do the audio? And yes, I am. In fact, week after next, I'll be recording the audio to Just Jones, and we're going to do it here. The Nashville people, Gabe, and the Nashville people from HarperCollins are coming down. And Matt is going to be spinning the dials, and we're going to do it here. And so we're going to figure out a way that some of you might be able to come and watch and hang out while we do this if you want to. It'll take 3 days to get it done, but I am going to do the audio. And so when you see the link, like right, I think down there, Matt, you got the link up, right? Okay, so when you see the link, if you click that link and go to Amazon, up there you'll see, you want the hardback, do you want the audio? And so you can pre-order whatever you want, and it'll be ready for you. So this story, you know, I don't just like write a Jones book after a Jones book after a Jones book, because I am at the old man's mercy. You know, it's like, when am I going to see him? What am I going to hear from him? What am I going to learn? And this was a very unusual one, and I think it's the best story that I've ever done. I've certainly met some unusual people. The characters in this book are just. I really fell in love with the 13-year-old. There's a 13-year-old kid named Oliver Sutherland. He has very, very, very red hair. I have a picture of Oliver, if you want to see it. I don't know if I should probably show this or not, and I think I can find it pretty quickly. But this picture of this kid, and this kid, everybody in town, I'm going to tell you, everybody in Orange Beach loves this kid. I mean, they just love him. But they're a little suspicious of him because it's like they think he's getting away with something. And they don't really know what he's getting away with because nobody's ever caught him at anything. But during the course of this book, what I am detailing, this period of time that the book takes place, this town, our town, has become engulfed by pranks. Somebody is pulling pranks in the town of Orange Beach, Alabama, and it's increasing. I mean, they are really ramping up. I don't know if I can find Ollie's picture or not, but I'll show it to you at some point. I'll find it, and I'll show it to you. Some other show. Oh, I found it. This is the kid. This is Ollie Sutherland, right there. And bright red hair, awesome kid. But there is a woman in town that he does not like, and she does not like him. And to be fair, we don't like her either. Okay, nobody in town. Her name's Blair Houston Monroe. And hey, Charlene Haber. And her name's Blair Houston Monroe, and nobody likes her. I'm just telling you, nobody likes her. And the pranks begin to bend less toward the town and more toward her. And so a lot of the climax of the book has to do with what happens and how Jones intervenes. There's also a young woman named Keeley that Jones meets in an unusual way. And I think I'm going to read that part of how he meets her for you today. But here's one of the parts that I wanted to tell you. As a writer, I love connecting things. I love, I've said for a long time that if I'm going to write a book that I think will mean something to people and will keep people's interest, then there have to be connections that you're looking for. And so one of the things that I love is if I can find some kind of historical context that happened way, way years ago and create a prologue with it and somehow match it to today's world, somehow show what has happened because of that situation. That is hugely interesting to me. I've seen a few authors be able to pull that off in a great way. And so, Jan Ritter, you're leaving? You're on your way to surgery? Oh, okay. Be careful. Lord, take care of Jan. And just watch us later, okay? So I'm actually going to read you the prologue, and then I'll go into the first chapter, okay? But the prologue is true. I mean, people ask me all the time, what about Jones? Yeah, okay, Jones is a guy, and I, I'm using literary license in some of the stuff, but I'm trying to learn from the guy too and trying to put it in a cohesive story. But the research I did in finding the stuff in the prologue, this is actually true, and it's adapted from the historical record of the Muskogee Nation, which these became the Creeks, the Native Americans, the Creeks. So, you ready? And I've had to learn how to pronounce some of these words. So, here we go. You ready, Matthew? You ready? Everybody ready? Okay, here we go. Can I get my glass? I think I probably need to get my glass. So sit back and listen as we begin. Just Jones. Sometimes a thing seems impossible until it is actually done. Prologue. The land between two rivers at the time of emergence. It was the first story to be told. In the beginning, Hesegetamase created sky and dirt and water. Soon he made the eagle to guard the sky, corn to spring from the dirt, and fish to keep the bugs out of the water. Seeing that it was all good, Hesegetamase then made his children. In the moment of first breath, Hesegetamase swept his left hand across the land and spread a giant cloud of fog around his children. They could not see each other and were quickly separated. Groups began to form as they located first one, then another in the mist. But as they tried to find their way, each group moved farther from the others. When the fog finally began to blow away, the people who were first able to see called themselves the Wind Clan. As the fog cleared from all the land, clans took their names from the first things they saw, and so became the bear, deer, turkey, alligator, raccoon, and bird clans. By this time, just as Hesegetamase had intended, his children had scattered to the four directions. Some went to the rising sun. Some wandered the other way and made their homes where the sun hides itself in the darkness. Many journeyed into the cold wind until they had to build shelter, while most of the rest walked until coming to the big water. There it is said that Hesegetamase fed them with food from inside wet stones. Of all Hesegetamase's children, only the Wind clan chose to stay where he had made them, in the land between two rivers. Hesegetamase had worked hard to forge his people and make a beautiful home for them. As he saw that it was good, the master of breath swept his right hand in a circle and built a place of rest for himself. Surrounded by a vast beaver ruin and across a great swamp ran a long, narrow lake that connected two mighty rivers, the Alibamu and the Chikasha. There, on a high bluff overlooking the ancient lake, Hesegetamase created what all would call the place of coverings. He placed 12 oak trees in a wide circle. When he had arranged them perfectly, Hesegetamase created the greatest tree of them all and placed it in the center. Hesegetamase told these oaks to keep their green leaves through all seasons, and decreed that the one he had placed in the center would grow to the top of the sky. With his fingers, Hesegetamase tangled the branches of the mighty oak trees he had placed in a circle and bound them to the branches of his special tree. This created a covering to provide shelter and prevent his children from climbing to his home before it was time for their spirits to join him there. The trees threw shade upon the ground, and the earth underneath their covering was clean and cool. Sweet acorns fell there in such numbers that they piled upon themselves and had to be pushed aside before one could walk through or sit down to rest. None lasted for long, however, because the acorns were eaten by every animal in the forest. And when the animals feasted there, all did so peacefully and with consideration for each other, because they knew this was what Hesegetamase expected of them. The master of breath had made it known that all clans were welcome there at any time, but there was a specific law that had to be observed without exception. When under the coverings of Hesegetamase, all present were to be kind-hearted and patient. Each clan was to seek deep understanding of the others. All were to use words of joy and gratefulness and praise. When plans were made about how the clans would work together and how the people would prepare for winter, chiefs and members of fire councils came together under the center tree. Hesegetamase would also be there to watch and listen closely to everything that was done or said. Everyone felt the master's presence, and so everyone carefully considered each word before speaking aloud. This was how things were done in the days when the earth was young and people were kind to one another. But there came a time when Svetne, the evil one Hesegetamase had cast into the swamp and allowed to rule under its foul waters, began to cause trouble. Where harmony had once existed between brothers, Svetne created discord. Where families had only known trust, the evil one stirred suspicion. And though generosity had been their way, Svetne introduced the clans to jealousy. One day, during this season of discontent, a loud burst of sound was heard across the land. As the clans gathered at the coverings, they looked to the biggest oak, the tree in the center, and saw that its body had split. The crack was only the size of a warrior's finger, but it was deep, and it slowly widened as everyone watched in alarm. Accusations began to fly, and arguments intensified, but before blood was taken, the voice of Hesegetamase, as if carried by thunder, sounded within them all. "Stop this fighting," they heard. I did not create your hearts for trouble." There was a cry then from many of the people, for all knew Hesegetemase's chosen tree was being rent in two because of his displeasure with them. At that very moment, the old people tell us, a warrior named Savas stepped forward with a longbow of golden oak and strung it quickly. Holding a single arrow up and into the sunlight, all eyes were drawn to the arrow's stone. Sharpened to a keen edge, its shape was a study in perfection, each side tapering to a thorn's point at its tip. But most incredible was the astonishing color of the arrow's stone. Almost aglow in the sunlight, the arrow's head was whiter than snow. Of the broadening crack, the warrior said, "Though the grain of the tree springs from the same root, its wood has now decided to disagree. By going in different directions, neither side is as strong as they once were together." Some were nodding, and all were quiet. Not only have the two sides chosen a course that will make them ever weaker, Savas continued to explain, but they have now opened themselves to a future in which they will become weaker still. Without protection, this crack is an entryway for crawling things to journey into the tree's heart. If that pathway is not blocked, the heart will be captured. The enemy will then be free to consume it from within, and the tree will die. "Can anything be done?" a warrior asked. "Is there anything we can do?" another woman offered. For a moment he said nothing, and tears began to flow from the people, for they were very sorry for what they had caused, and they were ashamed. Finally, the warrior spoke. "I have come to bind you together, to make all things new." With those words, he walked from the center tree and did not stop until he had taken as many strides as there are fingers on the hands of 25 warriors. Reaching one of the 12 trees, he turned, planted his feet, drew his bow, and let the arrow fly. The white arrowhead buried itself firmly into the crack of the chosen tree. There were exclamations followed by stunned silence as the warrior returned. Carefully, he reached for the arrow's shaft and twisted it, easing it out of the crack without the arrowhead. "The arrowstone," he said, "has gone into the deepest part of the tree's wound. There, each side of the stone will begin binding together the two sides that should have never been apart. This tree is now a symbol of peace. It will continue to grow, but only you will decide whether or not the healing wisdom begun this day will continue to bind your own wounds of foolishness." The old people say that when Savas spoke his final words, he placed the bow over his shoulders and began to climb up the very tree he had just saved. He climbed until they could no longer see or hear him, and all present knew he had returned to his father, Hesegetemase. From that day forward, all the great chiefs would travel to the coverings on solstice, the day the sun stands still. There, they would light a council fire and speak in honor of the warrior who brought peace to their people. The gathering was always ended with a ceremonial binding of the wound. As the blaze turned to embers, a single arrowstone, the most beautiful and valuable of all they carried among them, was selected. Together, the great chiefs would press the symbol of their commitment to Hesegetemase and to each other into the ancient wound of the massive tree they called the Peacemaker Oak. Okay. Chapter 1. Keely Higgins was bent at the waist, lightly touching her dark hair with the tips of her fingers. "Why did I even wake up?" she groaned. "My head is about to explode." The old man sitting next to her on the metal bench crossed his arms and frowned. "Is it a sinus thing?" he asked. "Or an I had too much to drink kind of headache? Could be from tension. Tension will cause them. You know, that kind that comes from your shoulders up the back of your neck and over your head? Those are from tension. So if it's from tension, I'm sure it's a bad one." Keely sat up and turned stiffly to face the old man. Staring at him through cloudy eyes, she paused for a moment. Then, taking a deep breath to demonstrate her patience with his questions, she answered, "I've had a cold for 3 weeks. Yes, I drank too much last night, and I've been told that stressful environments create tension. Might this be considered a stressful environment?" The old man grinned. "My point," she continued, "though I'm not sure why I feel compelled to make one for you, is that, now that I think about it, my headache is probably the tragic consequences of combining all three. My nose is stopped up, I am hungover, and I'm in jail. So, yes, all three: sinus, alcohol, and tension. But thanks for asking." With that, Keely considered the conversation finished. Lifting her feet to the bench, the young woman wrapped her arms around her knees and positioned her face in such a way as to be shielded from any further interruption. The two were surrounded by bars, seated on the far side of an area approximately 15 by 40 feet. The absence of beds and the substantial size of the locked space suggested a temporary function. A double row of benches was fastened firmly to the cement floor, with one situated along the back wall, which was also solid concrete. The seating was illuminated, but not so sharply as the brightly lit area near the locked door. "It is rather exciting to be here." The old man's comment broke the brief silence. Keely turned her head, peering up from her self-made cocoon with one eye, and saw his arms were still crossed and that he had leaned back against the wall. He appeared to be quite relaxed, almost happy, she thought. Certainly he was at ease. And as she watched, he turned this way and that, looking around as if this were one of the most interesting places he'd ever seen, before saying, "Yes, a jail cell can be a remarkable tool." Yes, it's remarkably horrible," Keely said. "And exciting? I don't even know what you... A tool? What does that... Oh, my head. Never mind." She went back into her cocoon, her aching head cradled in her hands. Standing, the old man stretched and yawned loudly. A muffled shh came from Keely's huddled figure. The old man's eyebrows lifted in an expression of pure innocence. "I'm sorry," he said, although he was not. "I didn't catch what you just said," he finished, although he absolutely had. Keely's words were still muffled, but her response was delivered with much more energy. "God," she wailed, "can you please just shut up for a minute?" "Certainly," he said a bit frostily. "If you're going to put it that way, of course I can." With that pronouncement, the old man turned away from Keely while crossing his arms and tightly clamping his right hand over his mouth. For several seconds he rocked back and forth. Had anyone been watching, they might have been confused, for it would have been apparent that the old gentleman was laughing uproariously, but to himself, and without making a sound. He wore blue jeans and a white T-shirt with leather flip-flops. His longish, snow-white hair framed a deeply tanned face and the most startling eyes Keely had ever seen. In fact, they were the first thing she'd noticed after being placed in the cell. The old man's eyes were blue, but it was a brighter shade of blue than she had ever seen. It was as if his eyes had been encased in crystal. There was a clarity to them Keely was unable to define. She had heard of eyes that sparkled, but always considered that specific description a way of referring to excitement reflected in a person's face. But this old man, his eyes really did sparkle. He had already been in the cell when Keely was locked in during the early morning hours. When the door had shut behind her, the officer quickly departed. Keely simply stood by the door with tears streaming down her face. Vomit had soaked the front of her blouse, and a swelling red knot was evident on her forehead. She had been angry, afraid, and drunk. Now her head pounded ferociously, but she was beginning to recall those first moments in the cell. The old man had stood when she walked in, Keely remembered, and he had said something. What was it? Oh, yes, he had bowed slightly and said, "Welcome. Come in and rest. I've been waiting, and I'm glad you're here." Weird. Had he really said that? Or did she imagine it? Her recollection was murky at best. Nevertheless, what the old man said penetrated the fog in her brain and brought her back to the present. "You know," Keely said as she lifted her head with a sigh, "I'm sure I'll regret asking, but why is a jail cell a remarkable tool?" The old man grinned. "When a life is spinning out of control, few things bring reality into utter focus as effectively as a jail cell. Oftentimes it is a lack of proper focus that allows a life to spin out of control in the first place." "Proper focus?" Keely asked with a hint of suspicion. "What do you mean, proper?" The young woman did not lose the old man's gaze as she straightened and leaned against the black wall. He sat down beside her and considered his answer for a moment before speaking. "A lot of people believe they lack focus," he said, "when focus is not what's missing at all. For instance, at least part of why you find yourself in jail at this moment proves how effectively you were able to focus last night. Unfortunately, you focused on vodka tonics." The old man patted her on the hand. "Many people say they can't focus because they worry all the time." He chuckled. "You see, focus isn't their problem because worry is focus. It's focus on the wrong thing. When we worry, we lack proper focus." Keely stared at the old man for a moment through half-open eyes. "Who are you?" she said. "Jones," he said, and smiled. Then, nudging her playfully with his shoulder, he added, "Not Mr. Jones, just Jones." She didn't return the smile, but watched as he stood and stepped to the brightly lit area near the cell door. A jail is also a near-perfect starting gate, he said absently as he ran his hand along the steel bars and poked his finger into a welded joint. Keely's eyes narrowed. She wanted the old man to shut up. Why wouldn't he just be quiet and let her go back to sleep? She knew that the only way to shut him up was to be unresponsive, and so decided she would not say another word. Almost immediately, however, Keely blurted out another question. "Why a starting gate?" she heard herself say. When Keely asked her question, she frowned as if she had eaten something distasteful. For some reason, the old man thought that was funny and laughed, motioning for her to stand and join him at the door. "Come here, young lady," he said. "Move into the light." He was only a short distance away, but held his hand out toward her. Keely did not want to stand or even shift position, but felt oddly compelled to do as this man, Jones, asked. Reluctantly, she stood and almost immediately sat back down and leaned against the concrete wall. With her eyes closed, Keely groaned. "I can't do it," she said. "I feel like I'm going to throw up." It was a moment or two before Keely realized that the old man had not responded. Opening her eyes, she was taken aback to see him in the same position, right hand still reaching forward, and in the same place he had been when she had attempted to stand. There was one difference, she noted. Jones was no longer smiling. Neither was he frowning, the young woman decided. Instead, the expression on his face was one of concern or urgency or longing. Keely thought, in any case, she sensed the old man's determination. Choosing not to think about it any longer, Keely closed her eyes again. "Hey!" Keely jumped, startled. The old man had practically yelled at her, and if she hadn't felt so badly, she'd have yelled right back, but a low snarl was the best she could muster. "What?" "Don't quit now," he said. "Come on, try again." Keely was about to end the conversation with a rude yet crisply articulated comment. But as she gathered breath for the effort, the old man tilted toward her at an impossible angle. Forgetting what she was about to say, Keely blinked hard and looked closely. His right hand remained outstretched, but with his left, Jones had gripped a bar of the cell. He was leaning as far as the span of his arms would allow. The old man wiggled his fingers toward her and said again, "Come on." To Keely, it was a ridiculous visual. Here she was in a jail cell, and this old guy was reaching out for her like she was in the water, sinking or needing help or something. "I am drowning, aren't I?" "Yes," Jones said simply. "Yes, you are." You know what? We're out of time. And I do have another chapter to read to you, but I don't want to wear you out. And so if it's okay, I will read chapter 2 to you Monday. We'll do a Blue Plate special Monday, and I'll read chapter 2 to you then. Chapter 2 is... Let me just read the first page of chapter 2, okay? And now, but I'll read the rest. This is just like a page worth of chapter 2, okay? This is chapter 2. And it just brings the story around, and I think you'll be looking forward to Monday with this. Okay, so 0. It was a word that perfectly described the amount of sense this phone call was making to me. It was the middle of the night, and I was not yet fully awake. What? I managed to croak, requesting the information be repeated. I wasn't certain I had heard correctly. Who? Again, I asked the caller to restate the information. Why? This I asked several times. True, I was in a fog, but the news she was attempting to deliver was almost incomprehensible. When? Not that I cared. At this point, I was stalling for time, struggling to think clearly, but it wasn't working. This made no sense, or as I stated earlier, 0 sense. Was this someone's idea of a joke? I turned the clock on the bedside table toward me. It read 3:27, a time that is either late at night or early in the morning, depending on who you are, of course. For me, it was both. As a writer and a speaker, I often rise early to pack away on my computer keyboard in the pre-dawn silence. On the other hand, flight delays or long drives occasionally cause me to crawl into bed about this time, and upon those occasions, I consider it late. Crossing the room, I quickly pulled on the blue jeans I'd left draped across a chair and headed to the closet for a shirt. Are you going to your office? Polly said sleepily. And did the phone ring? No to the first question, I replied in the darkness. Yes to the second. And as an aside, good grief, I wish I could sleep like that. Despite the circumstances, I smiled and shook my head, acknowledging to myself once again how vastly different my wife and I were in so many ways. This way had practically become a family joke. A hurricane couldn't wake her up. Me, drop a feather on the floor, I'm out of bed, dressed, ready to go. If you aren't headed to your office, why are you getting dressed? She shook off the sleep and sat up to turn on the lamp. And who called it? Polly leaned over to look at the clock. At 3:29 in the morning. Now, fully clothed, I approached her side of the bed and turned off the lamp. Well, I began, it's one of those good news, bad news kind of things. Okay, she said, waiting. I kissed her on the head. The good news is that Jones is back. The bad news, however, I took a deep breath and sighed, is that apparently the old man is in jail. So then we really get into chapter 2. And I promise to read that for you Monday. I'm really excited about this book. And you guys, if you don't mind clicking that Amazon thing and doing a pre-order, that would be awesome. Also, some people have asked, they've said, how can we order to help you best? Well, at first, we're trying to maybe hit a bestseller list or whatever. And curiously, now, I don't understand what I'm about to explain to you, okay? But this is something, if you can spread the word about this quietly and just remember this. Apparently, Amazon reports to the bestseller list. Amazon reports and Barnes & Noble reports. They all report just like any other bookstore reports. Except that if you click on there and you order 3 books in one order, Amazon reports that as one book. So it's just very odd. And so if you can, if you don't mind, if you have Prime, it doesn't matter on your shipping or anything. But if you don't mind, I know this is ridiculous, but if you're going to buy a couple of books and give one to a friend or whatever, I would really appreciate you ordering a book, finishing the order, and then going back in and ordering another book so that both of them will count. Because it really matters to the publisher and ultimately to me that the book hit the bestseller list. Because I feel like you and I are a team, that we do these things and we work through these things to touch people, and that you have something that you can give to people that will create conversations and help you become influential in their lives. And so the more people that know about the book, the better things go and the easier it is. And so if you don't mind, let's try to get this thing on the bestseller list if we can. So I'm excited about this. I feel like I just can't wait for you to get this book, because I've been thinking about you the whole time. I have been writing it, and chapter 2 coming on Monday. All right? You guys have a great Friday tomorrow. Be safe. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you Monday. Thanks. Enjoyed this Blue Plate special with you.